Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gay with God podcast. I am Midge Noble, your host, and also the author of Gay with God, Reclaiming My Faith, Honoring My Story. So we've been so busy lately, haven't we? Keeping up with all the news, trying to discern what's right, what's wrong, what's blown out of proportion. It takes a lot of energy to just keep up, especially with everything else we have to do. And we've been talking about how we can kind of bring ourselves back to a normal kind of baseline. How can we be gay with God and love our neighbors and do the things that we would want to do in the walking and talking of Jesus that has kind of gotten put to the background in some situations because of all of the drama and the chaos and the fear. Yet again, South Carolina has decided they're going to do a resolution and see if they can get it passed to abolish the Marriage Act in South Carolina. And I put out some feelers like, okay, so I get confused sometimes. If we are married and we're legally married and it is part of the Constitution that we could be married, then what happens? What happens in South Carolina if they pass the resolution? What happens then? If you move to South Carolina and you got married someone else, will you still be married in South Carolina? Many people probably already know the answer to that, but I've researched that because, the bottom line is it's still chaotic to have that kind of pending doom of losing marriages anywhere, whether it affects me personally or if it affects the people I care about in South Carolina or if I just care about people in general. I don't want anybody's rights to be taken away, and I'm a little bit weary, as I'm sure all of us are, that we continue to have to fight again and again to protect the rights that we should have always had. So today, I'm talking about when we give ourselves permission. Permission to what? Well, sometimes just to give ourselves permission to feel the ugly feelings, to feel them as ugly as we can feel the ugly feelings, and not beat ourselves up about that. Because when you're on the chopping block, whether it be Roe versus Wade, whether it be marriage equality for LGBTQIA plus people, whether or not you're the right skinned person to stay in this country, even though you are a citizen, that you may have been born here, the ugly feelings that come up when you see all of these rights and protections challenged, abolished, and thrown away, even if they put them back later. How many things are we now seeing that the Supreme Court or a judge has said, no, you couldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done that. You got to rehire all these people. You got to return all this money. So there are times where things are coming back to us, but in between time, it's okay to give ourselves permission to be angry, to be frustrated, to be tired. It's okay. It's okay to feel really bad, like physically bad, because the stress can provide sometimes an illness or a cold or a worn down feeling. You haven't failed. You have not failed if you're having ugly feelings or if you feel bad, because these are things that are bad. Now, they may not last. They may teach us a lesson. But the truth of it is that when you feel these feelings, it's okay. And it's also okay to feel good when the entire world seems to be blowing up at the squatter in the White House's decisions. So it's okay to feel good. Sometimes the peace that happens is just like a surprise. So the other day, I had to come up to the cabin to meet a roofer who was going to remove the tiny screws that were in our metal roof for like the last 10 years, and we didn't know they were the wrong size because we didn't build the cabin. Somebody built it for us. And he noticed when we had like part of the metal roof just absolutely coming up away from the roof itself and slamming back down. Um, the guy came up and fixed the immediate problem during the winter when that was happening. And then he said, I have to come back and I need to redo all your screws. And we're like, well, we would appreciate that. So he was supposed to come on a Friday, and I needed to be here as early as possible to, let them in through the gate, which we keep locked, and I can give them the code, but he wasn't comfortable with that. So I got myself up and I went through the traffic and I went through the darkness and I got here at 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, it takes about 2 hours. On a good day, we can do 1:45, but it's about 2 hours. And he wasn't here, which I was somewhat grateful for, that I could open the gate, I could go ahead and turn on the water at the cabin, I can get things ready to be here for the day. And then I was planning to go back that evening because Beloved is still in recovery, and I knew she was going to be okay to stay that day by herself. There were people she could call if she needed to. But, with the dogs and Ella, our oldest hurt her foot, and, there was a lot going on. And yet, this was the perfect timing for this guy to come and do it. And we needed to get it done before the storms that come with the spring and the summer. So I came. I was here at 8. And by 9 o'clock, he still wasn't here, which I thought was a little weird because the last time he came, he rolled in about 9, or was supposed to, but then he had to come at 10. So I wasn't too worried, but I did text him and say, hey, I'm here already. The gate's open. See you soon. By 10, when he hadn't come, I called and he goes, oh, I can't come today. What? What do you mean you can't come today? I am here. I've been here since 8 o'clock in the freaking morning. Where are you? And he said, well, the wind is blowing really hard and it's just not a good day to come. And I said, well, it's not that windy here right now. And he goes, oh, but where I am, it's really windy and it's going to get windier throughout the day and it's going to take us a little while to do it. And I said, well, I'm here on Friday. I can probably stay through Saturday. Oh, well, that's my son's birthday. And I'm like, so what are we going to do? He goes, well, you did give me the code. If you want to, I'll come when the weather's right, whether you can be there or not. I'll take pictures and then we'll get together at some point and you can pay me. Well, that's not my best plan ever, to just let somebody come and do work and me pay them without actually seeing, but I can't be up on the roof anyway, so how would I really know? But anyway, so that was it. And so I call my wife and I say, honey, I guess I'm going to have to come home. He's not coming, and here's why. And we went through that whole thing. And she said, no, stay. I said, what do you mean stay? She said, you drove up first thing this morning. I know you're tired. You've been, taking care of me for months and months and months and months and months. Just stay. And I said, well, that doesn't seem right because I need to still be helping. And she said, I'm fine. I'm not doing anything I'm not supposed to do. I'm being really careful. Just stay. And so I stayed. And she said, even if you don't come home till Sunday, just stay. Take a break. Rest. Sleep. And don't take care of anybody. Which is how it would turn out because there was absolutely nobody up here except for the deer. And during the wintertime, we usually put out some food for the deer because there's a nice herd and they love our property. They were here first, and we take care of them while we're here and we're able to. So I stayed, felt a tinge of guilt and a lot of joy. I felt good about having some peace and quiet, leaving everything at home to God and neighbors who could help. And I enjoyed my time to be away, to take a moment to rest, to sleep in, to be able to just be. And that really did help recharge my batteries. I had long walks by myself without trying to tell a dog, don't eat that, don't pick that up, stop it, come here. And I just was with God and with me, We had very good open conversations, and I was able to get a lot out that I'd been holding in. I was able to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of recovery during that time. And I did actually stay until Sunday and came back that afternoon. So I had 2 good nights of rest and, you know, 2.5 days of just, doing things my way, and not being feeling guilty for not doing something for someone else. I just allowed myself to feel good about that. You know, when we are able to give ourselves permission, the way we respond after that, we get to make choices about that too. When something does happen, how will we respond if someone violates our privacy, or if someone cuts us off on the highway, or someone does something that is just absolutely ugly and horrible? And that can be something that happens online. It can be something that happens, just driving or in the store. I looked back at a post the other day when I first published the book, and I don't know why that came up in my memory, but it came up, and I was looking and I checked through the comments, and I didn't remember that some people were really, really ugly to me online, talking about how I will never be, gay with God because I'm gay and you can't be both. And, just really some ugly things about the value of me, and how I'm not as valued because I'm not the Christian they expect me to be. And when I read that back, I thought, wow, I was really surprised because I'd forgotten that any bad, comments had come through during that time in my life. And I read what I had responded to those people. And I felt kind of proud of myself for not having to defend myself, but just being in a place of openness and understanding and accepting where they were without taking it personally. Sometimes we are able to choose to respond in ways that really elevate our spirituality and shows where we are. And then other times when we act impulsively, angrily, challenge people for their thoughts and beliefs, then we've become a less spiritual person in that moment. It's like our gallon of spirituality is depleted down to the little minuscule at the end of the bottle. So it's always important to make sure that we can measure how we're responding and pay attention to that, because sometimes it's not the person doing something wrong. That's their opinion, but it's whether or not we are completely filled up with the love and the intentionality to be Jesus on this earth. And we're low. Our spirituality is low because maybe we've been too tired to continue to do the readings we want to do and to do the prayers that we want to do. And those things sustain us. Prayer and reading scripture and meditating, those are all the fuel that we need to keep our spiritual engines running at a very high level. And then when we're not doing those things, it's like we're putting water in our gas tank and it's getting depleted, and it's getting to a point where we can't respond out of the words of Jesus, and we're just reactive. So the more that we can nurture and fill our spiritual vessel, we are then walking and talking and speaking the words and behaviors that Jesus had while on earth, that we are so desperately wanting to emulate. When we feel that our vessel is low, then we need to give ourselves permission to rest. And that looks different for everyone. Some people can take naps. I've never been a napper. I usually feel more groggy and worse after I've napped. And so sometimes I can do it for a short amount of time. But, if napping is something you love to do and you give yourself permission to nap and that's how you refuel, absolutely go for it. Some people like bike riding or television to distract themselves from the things like silly shows or funny shows, and it distracts them from all the things that are going on in the world. Reading, whether that's scripture or your best crime novel or whatever it is, and maybe a day off chores, giving yourself permission to not do the to-do list. Now, some people can't stand that and it gives them more drama in their lives because they feel guilty. I wish that we could take that guilty word out of our mindset and out of our language, but it's there. Manage that how you can and give yourself permission to be in a state of quiet and bliss, whatever that means. Um, when we give ourselves permission to rest, that slows down all of the go, 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 which equals avoiding, 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 and all of that stuff that we're not feeling, that we're not responding to, we're not talking to God about. It all builds up. And as it's building up, we're depleting our spiritual vessel. So avoidance is so powerful, and it's so difficult to realize how damaging that can be to our mental health and our mental wellness, because that is the toxic halt method of hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And when you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, then you are depleting yourself of coping skills. So without resting, you're going to be definitely tired. Without resting, you may be skipping meals. Without resting, you may start to feel angry and because you don't have enough food or you haven't had enough rest. And you isolate. So the hungry, angry, lonely, tired halt method of paying attention to your mental health is really important. And when your mental health is at a really high level, you're more open to making the choices and behaving in ways that give you power, emotional power, and spiritual power, where you can redefine what is holding you back from being all that you want to be, and what do you need to add or take away to give you the best full spiritual vessel that you can have. You can also give yourself permission to be sacred. Every Sunday, I do a sacred Sunday morning post with some kind of thought or a picture or something that resonates with me, just to say, good sacred Sunday morning. And sacred, when you look at the definition of that, it talks about being dedicated, set apart, worthy, deep respect, and to be sanctified. So when we allow ourselves permission to be sacred, how we then act that out into the world is totally up to us. But it's definitely a spiritual journey at this point. Feelings are human. Responding is choices. Resting is highly recommended. And it rejuvenates our spiritual vessel. And to be sacred is how we put things into that vessel. When we dedicate ourselves to looking for the good, for being kind to ourselves, being kind to others, and we dedicate our day to peace or to kindness. Each day can be a day with a blend of all these things. But when we say, I'm going to have a peaceful day, which is what the monks talked about when I went to see them, today I choose to have a peaceful day. And that's a mindset. So if we're going to be on a sacred path every day, we're going to take the time to dedicate that day to something or to many things, but not too many, because then you're going to get overwhelmed. But if you could wake up and say, I'm going to have a peaceful day, or think of someone that you want to show kindness to today intentionally. Now, we may be kind to people like, yeah, go ahead and pass me in the grocery line. You have two things, I have a whole cart. Be kind and let them pass. But some of that is random. If you dedicate yourself to say, I'm going to call this person today because I know they're not feeling well, or I'm going to check in on this person because they're on my heart, and you dedicate a sacred day to being kind in whatever intentional or sporadic moment happens. When we choose to set apart, how do you set apart if you're thinking about being sacred? Well, part of that is you set apart time to be with God, whether it be 5 minutes or 30 minutes or however long you have, to intentionally sit with God, to intentionally talk and listen and meditate. You would be surprised at how much you begin to crave that time and how important it is to set the the intentions for the day. I love to do my sacred time in the morning before everything gets started because that's when I'm the most focused. And that's, the time that it's personal because nothing else is happening. If I'm up first, that's sometimes sad because I'm not getting as much rest, but it's also the perfect time to get together with God and to be focused and to have that deep respect for human life, for all human life, to know that even when our brothers and sisters are acting grossly inappropriately and maybe acting in ways that harm us, to be able to have deep respect for the God within them, even if they don't feel it or want it or ever choose to take part of it, it's still there. They are still a child of God. And if we are able to show deep respect for God's energy within them, that's the way I get around that, right? That I may really, really, really have negative feelings toward a person, and yet I have the choice to have deep respect for the breath of life that is in them as it is in me. So today and all days, I hope that you have an awareness of what you want to give yourself permission to do, and know that it is absolutely appropriate and encouraged to give ourselves permission to not only be all that we can be, but sometimes feel the feelings that you have and then talk to God about it. Think about how you're responding and choose to respond in ways that you won't regret and that you will actually feel empowered. Give yourself permission to rest, guilt-free rest, to rejuvenate and fill your spiritual vessel. And give yourself permission to be sacred and tap into that inner soul breath that you were given, to be able to dedicate your day to something powerful, empowering, and beautiful. To set yourself apart from the world for a few moments in order to be in the presence of the God of your understanding. To know that you are worthy and to have deep respect for all lives, whether they're choosing to live their best life or not, that we will feel respect for all human life because we are children of the God of our understanding. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, for subscribing, for sharing all of these podcasts. I really appreciate your efforts in keeping this podcast available for people to hear because, when you get more downloads, people can find it easier. And I appreciate you doing that so that other people can take this journey of developing a relationship with the God of their understanding and opening up their lives to who they are and who God has created them to be. Check out our Facebook group on Facebook called Gay with God, where we do a monthly group entitled My Faith Journey. And if you need support to help you through your coming out and or faith journey, you can go to the show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com, scroll all the way down to the bottom and see how you can connect with me to get a confidential and free session just to see how we fit. You can also, at empoweredmidge.podbean.com, find links to the book. And if you want a signed copy, you can buy the memoir, Gay with God, Reclaiming My Faith, Honoring My Story, on my website, gaywithgod.com. And that way, you can get a signed copy if you choose. If not, you can find it anywhere that you buy your books. If you are listening to this podcast and are questioning whether you can be gay and be in relationship with the God of your understanding, if you identify as LGBTQIA+, are not even sure if you are gay, God has always been within you. Even when you didn't know it, you have always been gay with God. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned to see how you can join the Gay with God community. And as always, you are loved. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger. Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.